The night bus from Nairobi to Mombasa was nearly full when Brian boarded. He clutched his small backpack, scanning the rows for his seat. It was a long journey, over 8 hours, but he didn't mind. He had done this trip countless times for work. Settling into his window seat, he barely noticed the man beside him until they were on the road. The stranger was tall, wearing a dark hoodie, and sat completely still. Brian glanced at him, expecting at least a nod or some acknowledgement, but the man remained silent, staring straight ahead. Something about him felt off. He wasn't asleep, nor was he using his phone. He just sat there, unnaturally rigid. Brian tried to shake off the unease and closed his eyes, listening to the hum of the engine. A few hours into the journey, the bus made a scheduled stop at Ntito Andii. Passengers stretched their legs, bought snacks, and used the restrooms. Brian stepped out for fresh air but noticed something peculiar. The man in the hoodie hadn't moved. He remained in his seat, staring blankly ahead. Feeling bold, Brian casually glanced at the man's lap, and that's when he saw it. A folded piece of paper, barely visible under his sleeve. It had smudged writing on it. As the bus lights flickered, Brian could just make out the words, "Help me." A chill ran down his spine. He stepped back, scanning the other passengers. No one else seemed to notice anything strange. Who was this man? Was he in danger? Was this some kind of trap? Brian's heart pounded as he made a decision. He had to act. As the bus started moving again, Brian tried to think. He couldn't just ask the man what was wrong. If someone was watching him, it could put them both in danger. Instead, he decided to test something. Casually, he dropped his phone, letting it slide slightly under the man's seat. Bending down to retrieve it, he whispered, "Blink twice if you need help." For a moment, nothing happened. Then 2 slow blinks. Brian's breath caught. This man was in real trouble. He needed to alert someone. The driver? No, if whoever was behind this was on the bus, they'd overhear. He had to be smart. Thinking fast, he pulled out his notebook and scribbled a message, "Are you alone?" He pretended to yawn and stretched, letting the note slip onto the man's lap. A few moments later, the man subtly shifted, his hand moving ever so slightly. When Brian looked down again, the paper had new writing, "2 men. Watching me." Brian felt the weight of the situation. If these men were dangerous, confronting them was risky. He needed a way to alert someone, discreetly. Brian took a deep breath. He stood up, stretching, and pretended to stumble as the bus swayed. As he steadied himself, he casually tapped the shoulder of an elderly woman in the row ahead. "Excuse me, do you know what time we get to Voi?" he asked, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. The woman glanced at her watch. "Around 3 a.m. Brian nodded. That was enough. If these men were watching him, they'd think he was just another traveler making small talk. But in reality, he had used the tap on the woman's shoulder to drop another note, this time onto the floor near her feet. Read. Man in hoodie kidnapped. 2 men watching him. Alert police at next stop. Now all he could do was wait. An hour passed. Then 2. The bus was approaching Voi when suddenly, sirens. Flashing lights appeared in the distance. The bus slowed. Several armed officers stood in the road, signaling the driver to stop. Instantly, 2 men at the back stood up. Brian's stomach dropped. They knew. But before they could make a move, the officers stormed the bus. "Stay in your seats," one of them ordered. The 2 men hesitated, then bolted for the door, but it was too late. Within seconds, they were pinned down, arrested before they could escape. Brian exhaled, his hands trembling. The man in the hoodie let out a shaky breath. As the officers led the criminals away, one of them approached Brian. "We got an anonymous tip," he said. "Looks like you saved someone's life tonight." Brian turned to the man in the hoodie. For the first time, the stranger spoke. "Thank you." Brian just nodded, still processing what had just happened. He had boarded a normal bus, but stepped into a life-or-death mystery. And by trusting his instincts, he had changed the course of someone's life. Moral of the story: never ignore a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes paying attention and acting on your instincts can save a life.